The clock on my bedside table turned 2 a.m. exactly when I heard the first sound. A soft click. At first I thought I was dreaming. The house was completely dark, and the quiet of the night wrapped around everything like a heavy blanket. Then I heard it again. Another soft click. The sound of the front door unlocking. My eyes opened immediately. Beside me, my husband slowly sat up on the edge of the bed. He moved carefully, trying not to make any noise. But when you live with someone long enough, you notice even the smallest movement. He thought I was asleep. I kept my breathing slow and steady, pretending not to notice anything. The room was dark, but a thin line of moonlight slipped through the curtains. In that faint light, I watched him quietly stand up. He didn't turn on the lamp. He didn't check his phone. He simply picked up his jacket from the chair and walked toward the door. Something about the way he moved felt strange. Too careful. Too quiet. After 10 years of marriage, I knew his habits well. And leaving the house at 2 in the morning had never been one of them. The bedroom door opened slowly. Then it closed again. The hallway outside creaked softly as he walked toward the stairs. For a few seconds I stayed in bed, staring at the ceiling. Maybe there was a simple explanation. Maybe he couldn't sleep. Maybe he needed fresh air. But then I heard the front door open, and close again. The house fell completely silent. I sat up immediately. A strange feeling settled in my chest. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was something quieter, something colder. Curiosity. I slipped out of bed and walked to the window. Our bedroom overlooked the front yard. When I pulled the curtain aside slightly, the streetlights outside painted the road in pale orange light. And there he was, my husband, standing beside his car. But he wasn't getting inside. He was waiting, looking down the street, like he expected someone. My heart began beating faster. Then headlights appeared at the end of the road. A black car slowly turned the corner and stopped a few houses away. My husband walked toward it. Not quickly, not nervously, like he had done this before. The passenger door of the car opened, and someone stepped out. A woman. She walked toward him confidently. Even from the distance, I could see the way she smiled. And then something happened that made my hands freeze against the glass. My husband hugged her. Not like friends. Not like strangers meeting for the first time. It was the kind of hug people share when they haven't seen each other for a long time. My chest tightened. The streetlight illuminated their faces for a moment. I leaned closer to the window, trying to see clearly.
The woman said something.
My husband laughed quietly. Then they both got into the black car together and drove away. For several minutes, I stood at the window, staring at the empty street. The silence of the house felt heavier than before. My husband had never mentioned meeting anyone tonight. He had gone to bed normally. He had kissed me goodnight. And now he was driving away with another woman at 2 in the morning. I stepped away from the window slowly. My first instinct was to grab my phone and call him. Ask where he was. Ask who she was. But something inside me stopped that impulse. Because sometimes the truth appears when you don't interrupt it. Instead of calling him, I grabbed my keys. If he thought I was asleep, then he had no idea what I was about to do next. For a moment I stood in the hallway holding my car keys. My heart was beating faster than usual, but my mind felt strangely calm. There were 2 choices in front of me. I could go back to bed.
Pretend I had seen nothing.
Wait for my husband to return and act like everything was normal. Or I could find out the truth. I quietly slipped on my shoes and grabbed my jacket from the closet near the door. The house was still completely silent. Our daughter's bedroom door remained closed down the hallway. I paused for a second, listening carefully. No movement.
She was still asleep. Good.
The last thing I wanted was to wake her. I stepped outside and closed the door gently behind me. The night air felt cool and still. The same streetlight that had illuminated the road earlier now cast long shadows across the quiet neighborhood. The black car my husband had entered was already gone. But I knew the direction it had taken. I quickly walked to my car and started the engine. For a second, I hesitated. Was this a mistake? Maybe there was a simple explanation. Maybe the woman was a coworker. Maybe it was an emergency. But the way he had hugged her, the way he had looked around before getting into the car, those details didn't feel innocent. I slowly drove to the end of the street and turned in the same direction they had gone. The roads were nearly empty at this hour. Streetlights passed above my car one by one as I followed the quiet route toward the main road. For several minutes, I saw nothing. No black car. No headlights matching the one I had seen earlier. Then finally, near the next intersection, I spotted it. The same black car, parked beside a small cafe that stayed open late for travelers and night workers. I pulled my car into a parking spot across the street and turned off the headlights. From that distance, I could see clearly through the cafe windows. My husband was sitting at a table near the back. The woman sat across from him. They were talking, and they looked comfortable together. Too comfortable. I watched as the woman reached across the table and touched his hand. He didn't pull away. Instead, he leaned closer, like someone sharing a private conversation. My stomach tightened. 10 years of marriage. 10 years of believing I knew the man sitting in that cafe. And suddenly, everything felt uncertain. I considered walking inside, confronting them immediately, but something told me to wait, because the way they were speaking, the way they kept glancing toward the door, it felt like they were discussing something important, not just meeting secretly, planning something. A few minutes later, my husband pulled something from his jacket pocket. A small envelope. He slid it across the table toward the woman. She opened it slowly. Even from across the street, I could see her expression change. Not surprised. Not confused. Satisfied. She nodded. Then she said something that made my husband laugh quietly. But the moment that truly made my blood run cold came seconds later. The woman reached into her bag and pulled out a photograph. She placed it on the table between them. My husband stared at the photo for a moment. Then he looked around the cafe quickly, like he wanted to be sure no one was watching. My curiosity grew stronger. What was in that photograph? Why were they meeting secretly in the middle of the night? Then the woman turned the photo slightly toward him, and the angle changed just enough for me to see it through the window. My hands tightened on the steering wheel, because the photo on the table wasn't of my husband, and it wasn't of the woman either. It was a picture of my house, the house where our daughter was sleeping. For a moment, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, but the longer I stared through the cafe window, the clearer it became. The photograph on the table was unmistakable. It was my house, the front porch, the white railing, even the small tree near the driveway. My chest tightened. Why would they have a photo of her home? I leaned slightly closer to the steering wheel, trying to hear their conversation through the glass. But the street was too quiet, and the cafe windows were closed. All I could see were their expressions. The woman tapped the photograph with her finger while speaking. My husband listened carefully. Then he nodded. Not once.
Twice.
Like someone agreeing to a plan. A terrible thought suddenly crossed my mind. Were they planning to sell the house? But that didn't make sense. The house wasn't just his. It was ours. We had bought it together. Then the woman pulled out another paper from her bag. This one looked official. Several pages clipped together. Documents. She slid them across the table. My husband flipped through them slowly. Then he signed something. My heart skipped. Signed? Signed what? Before I could think further, the woman carefully placed the documents back into her bag. Then she picked up the photograph again and tucked it away. The meeting was ending. I quickly leaned back in my seat so they wouldn't notice me watching. A minute later, they stood up from the table. My husband said something that made the woman laugh again. But this time the laughter didn't feel friendly. It felt like relief. They walked toward the cafe door together. My heart began racing again. If they stepped outside, they might see my car. I turned my head away slightly and pretended to check my phone. The cafe door opened. Footsteps approached the parking lot. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of getting back into the black car together, the woman walked toward a different vehicle parked nearby. She unlocked a silver sedan and looked back at my husband. He nodded once. Then she drove away, leaving him standing alone in the parking lot. My husband remained there for several seconds. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. I watched carefully. His voice was too quiet to hear, but his expression told me everything. He looked tense, almost worried. After a short conversation, he ended the call and looked down the empty street. Then he got into the black car and drove away, back toward our neighborhood. I waited until his car disappeared around the corner before starting my engine. The drive home felt longer than usual. My mind replayed everything I had just seen. The secret meeting, the envelope, the documents, the photograph of our house. Something was happening behind my back. Something serious. When I arrived home a few minutes later, the house looked exactly as it had before. Quiet,
Dark.
peaceful. I parked the car and walked inside carefully. The hallway clock showed 2:48 a.m. Our daughter's bedroom door was still closed. Everything looked normal, but I knew it wasn't. I walked into the living room and sat down on the couch, waiting. 20 minutes later, I heard the front door unlock again. My husband stepped inside quietly, trying not to make noise. He didn't notice me sitting in the dark living room. He walked past me toward the kitchen. Then he stopped suddenly when I turned on the lamp beside the couch. The light filled the room. He froze. "You're awake?" he asked. "Yes." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I said the words that made his face change completely. "I saw you." His expression tightened. "What do you mean?" "I saw the cafe." The silence that followed felt heavier than anything that had happened earlier that night. My husband slowly placed his keys on the kitchen counter. Then he looked at me carefully. "You followed me?" "Yes." Another long pause filled the room. Finally, he sighed. "You weren't supposed to see that." I stood up slowly. "See what exactly?" He ran his hand through his hair, clearly thinking about what to say next. "The meeting." "With the woman?" "Yes." "Why were you meeting her at 2 a.m? For a few seconds, he didn't answer. Then he said something I never expected to hear. "She's a real estate lawyer." My mind stopped. "A lawyer?" "Yes." "For the house." "The house." I repeated. He nodded slowly. "I've been trying to surprise you."
Surprise-me?
"The mortgage." He opened a drawer in the kitchen and pulled out a folder. Inside were copies of the same documents I had seen at the cafe. "I finished paying it off tonight," he said quietly. I stared at the papers. The final payment confirmation. The legal transfer document. The house was now completely ours. No bank. No debt. Nothing left to pay. My husband looked at me with a tired smile. The photo she showed me was proof the paperwork matched the property. My heart sank slightly. So the meeting was to finalize everything. I felt a mix of relief and embarrassment wash over me. All the fear, all the suspicion, all the worst possibilities my mind had imagined. And the truth had been something completely different. My husband walked closer and sat beside me on the couch. "I wanted to surprise you tomorrow," he said softly. I looked at the papers again.
Then at him.
"Well," I said quietly, "you definitely surprised me." He laughed gently. And as the clock moved closer to 3 a.m., the mystery of the night finally settled into something much simpler than I had feared. Not betrayal, not secrets, just a husband trying to finish something important before telling the person he loved the most.